Hey, good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for attending this session about how to support your SPC journey. My name is Bob Turnus, and I'm actually one of the SPCs here at Applied Frameworks. Now, for those attendees who don't know our shop, Applied Frameworks provides safe training and transformation. And my role at Applied Frameworks is to help individuals and organizations transform themselves as well as the organizations that they support. Also joining us today is Kristen Harrison as our marketing manager. Kristen's worked very hard to put this webinar together, so big thanks to Kristen for the organization and the infrastructure here. Of note, Kristen is also taking Implementing Safe next week, and so she is soon to be a brand new SPC. So thanks again, Kristen. Now, I'm personally a really big fan of our two presenters, both of whom I've met at various points in my journey. And Phil Gardiner is one of our SPCTs at Applied Frameworks. He's also put together and contributed to parts of the framework, meaning helping to support the LPM pieces that Scaled Agile has put together. And he's also joined here today by the way, Phil is also our safe practice lead here at Applied Framework. So Phil, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Bob.
Absolutely. And also we have an external guest. We're joined by Harry Koehnemann. Harry is a SAFE fellow and a huge contributor, proper contributor to the SAFE framework. And I've worked with Harry in the past. Harry, it's great to see you. And thanks so much for joining us today.
Great. Thanks for having me, Bob. I'm very excited. Should be a fun hour. Looking forward to it.
We're looking forward to it. Great. Hey, a few housekeeping items as we start here. Today's session is being recorded. Now, this recording will be made available to attendees after the session. So just for awareness, it is being recorded. We're also taking questions. We're going to have a pretty conversational style today, and we are really looking to have good questions from our attendees. So as you pose these questions, please do not use the chat function, but instead use the QA function within Zoom, and we'll address those questions both during the session and then at the end. Now, if we don't get to your questions, don't worry. We're going to address all those questions in the future via an email sent out to all of the attendees. So please do bring your questions. This is a hot topic. I know that we have a lot of people interested in this. And with that, I will kick it over to Phil and Harry.
Okay, great. I just, this is a webinar I've been wanting to do for a long time. So just thank you, Harry, for preparing with me on this. I think this is a question that a lot of SPCs ask themselves. And what I'm hoping that will help you with is really that this is the beginning of your journey, and where you take it, that's up to you. I became an SPC in early 2014. Back then, I was an awesome coach. I was fantastic, phenomenal. Right now, it's 2022, I'm pretty good. So along the way, some things happened to help me understand more about what I can do to help organizations. And, I'm hoping that some of the stuff that Harry and I chat with, some of the stories we tell, this is going to be more conversational and less lecture-y kind of thing. And please do ask your questions. And as Bob mentioned, putting them into the question portion allows us to both indicate when we've answered them for Bob as the facilitator, as well as ensures that we can capture them and answer your questions that we can't get to live in a follow-up email. So I met Harry in Scotland in 2015. And back then, once again, amazing SPC back then. And Harry was working with Dean and others at Scaled Agile to integrate a secondary version of SAFE called SAFE for Lean Systems Engineering. And so you actually had SAFE 2.5 and 3, and then you had SAFE for Lean Systems Engineering. And they worked to pull that together. This is an example of just how much Harry's influenced my own career. I had the joy of being able to help him with Agile for Hardware, an awesome toolkit that's out there on the SAFE community portal. Not a hardware guy, but I've worked with hardware customers. And so point being is that don't think about that you need to be be the end all be all for all things. You can have specializations. Harry, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, we all have specializations. My specialization, as you pointed out, Phil, was I spent a lot of time with engineering and really big systems with hardware, cyber physical, big system engineering. And we were adopting SAFe. As you mentioned, I was at a partner company at the time, and this is 2013 when I got my SPC. We bumped into Dean and said, hey, we like this framework. It's got a lot of things we're doing, but it's littered with software all over there. And the engineers will reject it and say, well, that's what the software people do, but us engineers, we have a different process we follow. And in the innovative way that we operate here at Scaled Agile, Dean said, oh, let's spike a different version of the framework, SAFe LSE. The smallest thing possible is we had to build a whole framework, then put it in front of the community that said, no, we don't want two frameworks. We don't want to go to our IT department and use a different term for a release train engineer or a product manager than we use for our engineering environment. It's got to be one, and that's one thing that's really, I think SAFe has done well for us is, and SPCs, you'll find this, is that it's given a taxonomy and terminology that's very consistent now. Really, it's ubiquitous across the organizations. Everybody, as weird as that term is, everybody knows what a release train engineer is. You find it in job applications. We see it on asks from the government proposals saying we need a release train engineer, somebody certified as one. So I think it's been very valuable, to address those types of things in the community.
Awesome. And so along those lines, let's talk a little bit about today, just a little bit the role of the SPC. And then we're going to really kind of frame this up from the standpoint of, where do you want to go? There's all these different areas. As Bob mentioned, I have a particular passion for LPM. For me, I spent years as a senior director at AT&T over front-end technology. Ironically, I don't consider myself to be a specialist in the technical side of the framework, because my passion has led me to lean portfolio management and mentoring SPCs and getting sustainable change to occur. And so we all have our expertise and our passions, and we'll talk about that. And then we're going to go through the materials, and our goal is to get to a point where at the Q&A, and we can certainly flip back to the content to answer some of your questions that put those things in reference. So first off,
my biases real quick, Phil.
Yeah.
I have never worked at the portfolio level and have nothing to offer there and have no interest. I'm the opposite. I've worked in big systems and engineering and architecture. So it's we're two peas in a pod, right? And
I remember the government said, give you an example, right? So we'll talk about community later. I was working at a defense contractor, and I was helping implement SAFe inside the government for a missile warning system. And they were asking me questions about large solution SAFe and solution trains. And I had some experience, 2 or 3 of that scale. But when it comes into integrating things across multiple government contractors, phone a friend, Harry. Hey, Harry, would you be interested in talking to Lieutenant Colonel, right? And he came in and he had a conversation. And so don't be afraid to tap into your community as needed as well. So, all right, let's think about the SPC role in SAFe, right? So as an SPC, you've got expertise. You want to develop that expertise to look at this and say, hey, that's SAFe, right? Do you understand deeply every single thing on there? I'll tell you, Harry and the framework team, Rebecca, Steve, Dean, they're always adding new stuff. There's a new advanced topic article coming out all the time. And so you have to work to keep up with this, right? I don't consider myself to be an expert on everything you see here. And I don't think I ever will be, because the pace of change, my brain can't keep up with all that, especially with the things I'm working on. Harry, anything you'd add to this?
Yeah, certainly we all have where we can add our value. Phil, you just talked about it, right? You could go in and talk to portfolio leaders and explain how SAFe works and why it's so much better than the practices they're using, because you have experiences there. You're going to do less of that to go into an aeronautics company or an automotive company, talk about large solutions, where I'm the opposite. I would go into an automotive company and talk about how we have to do smaller batches of system engineering and our requirements and build an integration infrastructure with technology. But I don't have the examples up at the portfolio level. So every person on this call, you have the places, as you mentioned, Phil, your expertise, where you have knowledge and stories and experience, and that's probably the best place for you to start, right? And we'll talk later where you'll probably find yourself as a top or a better consultant. But have you spent more time at the team level, or at an art level, or at the portfolio level? Have you been talking with executives more? So there's a lot of when we think about SPC, everybody's got their own background and history and places that they excel in. And your point, Phil, your passions. What drives you? Is it changing executives and their mindset, or is it working with teams down in the trenches, getting value to flow through the system?
And to have success, you need to be able to do all of that. Now, does that mean you need to do it all yourself? No. And we'll talk more about community, because it's a really powerful part of your journey. Now, this picture, I'll tell you that one of my mentors, Luke Koehnemann, he gave me a gift. So I spent many years working with innovation factories and customer obsessed organizations, and SAFe didn't have that front and center. When SAFe 5 came out, customer centricity became the center. Everything we do is for the customer. It brought in design thinking. It brought in some true product management. And this, when I talk to executives, leaders, anybody about SAFe, they're thinking this when they bring me in to talk to them. They're thinking this. I'm thinking this. To me, this is SAFe. 7 core competencies for business agility, 21 supporting dimensions, a limitless number of practices, both those that are in the framework today and maybe in the framework tomorrow, right? And so, how do you view the framework as an SPC? That also can be something. Harry mentioned, enterprise solution delivery. When I think that, I think Harry. Right? When I think agile product delivery and product management, I think Luke Koehnemann. When I think LPM, I think Dima Dajani. When I think continuous learning culture, I think Audrey Boydston. When I think lean agile leadership, Dr. Steve Maynard. There's phone of friends that I have for each of these competencies, because I want to get better. I want to learn and I want to grow. And Harry, you were there part of the framework team when this overview was created. Anything you could share with our SPCs and others here?
Well, I think you nailed it. This is a nice summary of the framework. SAFe is full of, as you mentioned, probably limitless practices, because we're going to keep innovating and evolving and supporting customers. And people look at the big picture, the one you showed before, and they say, "Oh, that's really big. It's confusing. It's hard to read. There's so much there." I don't look at it that way, because I can go to an organization like General Motors that has 18,000 engineers, and I can describe the organization with that picture fairly well. But other people get slightly confused by it. But the next slide, as you talked about, that's one that's much more easy to digest, right? We have to be successful as a company. We have to focus on the customer around these competencies. We have to be good at managing portfolios. We have to be good at building large solutions if we build them. We have to be good at getting products out the door. And to make that happen, it's all built on a foundation of good teams and leadership that gets it, right? That understands the new way of working and supports it, has that right mindset.
One thing I'll add here, right? So when I think SAFe 4.5 came out, they put in one slide that integrated Eric Ries's lean startup cycle. That gave me permission back in 2015 or 2016 rather, to create some more stuff around how can we actually apply lean startup inside SAFe. And it led to some pilot work before they even had an LPM class. And when I think about, imagine if you're somebody who's got a deep background with Lean Six Sigma, you're a green belt, you're a black belt. You may not be able, if you look right here, there's this dimension underneath organizational agility called leaning out business operations, right? There's how many times we're doing amazing software or hardware and we're ready to go, but then we've got hey, in order to sell this product to the market, we need a compensation plan. And even though we can get to market in 2 months with our awesome agile release trains, our marketing and legal and our HR department takes 6 months to create a new compensation plan. Real world story. And the solution was getting together in a room, doing some value stream mapping to see what it takes to build a compensation plan, and getting that from 6 months down to 4 weeks or less, so that the enterprise could keep up with business agility. Anyway, that's a squirrel. I'm gonna keep going here. So let's look at another view of SAFe. As a new SPC, days 3 and 4 of implementing SAFe are all about explaining this S-curve. It's based on Kotter's change model. And this is, you're a new SPC put out there into the world, right? It's kind of like, you've got your You've got here's $500, go head off to college, right? It's what do I do with this? And there's a lot of nuances here. Harry, you want to talk through this for a new SPC, if you don't mind?
Sure. So most SPCs hopefully know this is the implementation roadmap. This is how we adopt. The prior two slides were about SAFe and explaining the method. This is about how you adopt the method, right? How you adopt the process. Not everybody follows this exactly, but most people follow at least some close variation of it. And this also is another critical view for a new SPC is where do I have expertise in here? Phil and I were talking as we were preparing for this. I spent most of my time in two areas. Launching trains. I was a consultant early on in SAFe, and I was usually a lot of times the first train being launched at sometimes very large organizations, had to be very successful. To make that happen, we had to train the leaders. So going right above that, right? The go SAFe was kind of already decided. That's why they called me as a consultant. Some internals who sometimes there's some conversation ahead of time, but I didn't do a lot of identifying value streams and arts. I didn't do a lot of that, and there's a little bit of preparing for art launch to launch trains, but back in the day we didn't have the toolkits and things that enable those things. Certainly, and then I coach arts executions as a consultant. A lot of times you're in for the first PI or two, but then you hand it off as the consultant to our job is to make organizations successful themselves, not to bring an army of SPCs in to make them successful. So a lot of times I haven't done launching more arts and value streams. That's where you've enabled the organization to take care of itself and grow itself. But you as a new SPC, you may be someplace else. You may be designing the implementation, and you may have other people that are doing the art launches, and you're coaching down at those other arts to make them successful. They talk about arts after the fourth or fifth, maybe sixth PI. They kind of get this to be a rote thing, kind of redundant. So we need consultants to go back in there and re-energize them, revigorate them. That's launching more arts and value streams. And Phil mentioned before, getting it up to the portfolio. It's not just about value streams. Once we start getting people, the teams organized and agile and value streams organized, the next bottleneck is a portfolio. Do you fund us properly? Do you govern us properly? And then there'll be those bottlenecks. That's why we have to go extend the portfolio. So as an SPC, you can kind of look at that roadmap and say, where do I have experience? Maybe in the beginning, you spend a lot of time with executives and leaders. So you're more at the tipping point up there, trying to get executives to buy into this. We all have our areas of expertise, and you're looking here, where can I make the most impact in my organization and most effect?
Awesome. Thank you, Harry. So let's ask this question, what is an SPC? Now, I'll tell you that in several engagements I've worked, I've paired with, a director of the Agile Center of Excellence, or, a VP who's looking at implementing SAFe, and they know they need an SPC, but what exactly is an SPC, right? I remember one particular Fortune 10 customer that interviewed almost 300 SPCs. And I mean, there is such a wide, you've already heard just the differences in Harry and I, in our background, right? So many diverse, there's so many diverse things. There are customers out there that will say, give me the SAFe, right? And they want a partner to come in and tell them exactly what SAFe says. We'll get more about that in a little bit, and other times, it's a coach, somebody, hey, and on my own learning journey, I used to have this chip on my shoulder when it comes to, there's some people out there that are like, hey, you want to implement SAFe? I'm the expert. Here's all the things I've done. Listen to everything I say, do everything I say, and you will have success, right? That's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is, hey, well, what do you want to do? Well, what do you think, right? I'm a huge fan of professional coaching, but I'm also a realist to know that sometimes you can't wait. Sometimes you need that consultant hat. And so when you think about an SPC, I think there's maybe some people out in the audience who are also potentially, maybe you're a VP who's thinking about implementing SAFe. Maybe you're the leader of a COE and you're like, hey, how the heck do I find the right SPC for me? And so as we go into this next section, while it's tailored for SPCs, if you're looking at potentially hiring a partner or hiring an SPC or SPCs or people inside your company, who do we actually send to the implementing class to become our SPCs? Think about the stuff we're going to cover next about SPC responsibilities and all the different dynamics of being an SPC, because looking at this particular slide, I've seen SPCs that meet one or more of all of these bullets, and there's many, many more, right? Okay. So what's your passion? Where will you focus? What you're looking at here is a sampling of think of these as the most common things an SPC is asked to do within an enterprise. Is that a good way of looking at this, Harry, you think?
Yeah, it summarizes kind of that implementation roadmap to some degree, but are you going to be a leader within the organization at the executive level or the director level, kind of leading the change and part of what we call the LACE, Lean Agile Center of Excellence, and working with key stakeholders for budgets and resources and talking to functional managers to get commitments from them that you're going to redesign some teams for them and they're not going to be organized the way you thought they used to be organized. Or design the implementation. How should we be organized? And then eventually we have to go launch those teams and trains and arts and coach them, make sure they're successful. So those are, as Phil mentioned earlier, there are very few people that are good at all of that. There are some, but it's not me and it's probably not you, Phil. And yeah, there's certain places where we all excel.
And there's also the element of, do you want to do it? Right. So, I mean, when I look at this list, I gotta tell you, I didn't know how much I enjoy it, but I really enjoy working with a customer to design the implementation because I have a passion for safe that sticks, right? There's a joy I experience several times a year, maybe I got 3, 4, 5, I guess it varies, where I'll get a ping from somebody that I worked with 5 years ago, and they're giving me an update on how awesome they're doing now, or you wouldn't believe what we're at now. And so what I found is that investing in designing the implementation in a way that factors in organizational change management elements allows them to get to a faster state of sustainability where they're on their own, as Harry was talking about. The cost of me specializing in that in lean portfolio management means that I'm not focusing at helping agile teams or even the teams of teams focusing on optimizing and looking at their cumulative flow diagrams and optimizing for flow. I'm even, to these days, not being able to do as much training teams and launching arts. I spent, 5, 6 years doing that, but now I can add more value to a company by being part of a team. But you don't need me 40 hours a week. You've got Travis Moore, you've got Brian Vaughn, Rochelle Maurer, all these other individuals on our team that bring a lot of expertise, and their passion is those areas. So know that your journey might change. But one thing I do want to say, because I have been an internal change agent, right? Almost all of our, and this is funny, it's not something that we actually emphatically hire for, but almost all of our SPCs here at Applied Frameworks have been both an internal change agent and an external consultant. And it's life is different. And so I have a lot of empathy for individuals who are inside an organization. I've been inside an organization by myself. I sold the organization on safe, and then I had to deliver. And it was a big wake-up call for me. My point on this is that you may shift and focus on your journey. Don't be afraid to get help sometimes. I would not be where I was today if it wasn't for Eric Willicke, Mark Richards, M. Campbell Priddy, and Gene Tabaka, and a few others early on in my journey that made time for some questions for me. They were phone-a-friends, and they didn't have to do that. I didn't have a consulting arrangement with all of them. Now, this is back when there were probably 300 or 400 SPCs, and it was easier to take the phone call. But my point is that this is all a journey. And so think about these responsibilities and ask yourself, if my enterprise asks me to do this, am I prepared? If I'm not, what can I do to get there? So let's talk a little bit about mapping your journey here. And so long time ago, I got out of the team coaching stuff. My journey took me to large scale. I started at AT&T. I ended up going to another Fortune 10, other Fortune 50, Fortune 100. Just my journey just happened to have me in these big corporations. And what I found is I would be part of a team of 30 coaches. And what I saw was amazing, passionate people, both on ends of that spectrum. Well, what do you want to do? What do you think? Do what I say, you're going to fail, right? And all the goodness in between. And what I've learned is that there's a place for all of those personalities, all of those attributes. Knowing who you are is important. Knowing what style you need, right? And so I created this enterprise coaching kind of competency model, years and years ago. Talking to Harry, we've retooled it a little bit. for application to safe. And we're actually going to be, what you're seeing here is, I would actually call it clickable prototype, in that I've got a couple of customers we're working with that are going to use this to have their SPCs take a self-assessment. At the same time, we're going to use it here at Applied Framework so that we can understand where we want to meet all of our SPCs and where their expertise is. And so when we think about this, I'm just going to go through this quickly, and then we'll get into the community part and into our Q&A. But think about yourself as an SPC in your journey, right? We're understanding where you are today. Just like we want to use the self-assessments in SAFE to measure and grow, you can do the same thing with yourself as an SPC. If you're the leader of a COE, don't you want to understand, or leader of a SAFE practice for a consulting company, to understand the different skills, expertise, experience, attributes, and the domain areas of expertise and passion that your people have? So let's just go through this quickly. Well, first off, as an SPC, ask yourself, what can I do, right? So I mentioned a woman named Rochelle Maurer. I had the honor of mentoring her on a government contract back in, I think it was 2020. And she's a way better coach than I'll ever be. She's a certified coactive coach. She listens more than she talks. Her primary stance is coach. In fact, these days, every now and then, I'll actually go have a coaching call. I'll say, hey, Rochelle, can I borrow Coach Rochelle for a bit? And that's a skill set that she's invested heavily in developing, right? For me, I love mentoring people. There is a joy when Travis Moore, retired soldier, became an SPCT candidate earlier this summer. I was bawling, right? Him and I had a really deep moment, and there were tears, and it was because I knew that this is going to be, he's going to be a gift to the community, but at the same time, it's so beautiful to see somebody come into their own and evolve. And I love cultivating and enhancing those capabilities that they have, and training, right? Brian Vaughn, somebody that I've worked with for many years. He's one of the best trainers that I know. You see him in a SAFE class, he's just loving it, right? Now, I will tell you, I love training as well, because how else do I learn? But Brian, he's a natural born trainer. He loves it, right? People like, Audrey Boydston, who paired with me for my first implementing SAFE class, watching her and just the intentionality of crafting the learning experience. Facilitation, right? I participatory budgeting, right? You got the process, and then you've actually got how do you actually make it happen. There's an SPC who's actually also a certified Scrum trainer, Joel Bancroft Connors, that I paired with at a PB event, participatory budgeting event this summer. And the facilitation skills, there is large scale, small scale consulting, being able to get in front of think about the same event, getting in front of a senior exec and looking at their list of their 11 strategic priorities and saying, are those strategic, right? I mean, knowing when you can ask that question and when you better not, right? These are all the things you can think about when it's like, what are your skills? And there's a lot of depth to each of these. Then we want to ask ourselves, right? What have you done? So imagine if you're being, we had some pre-questions come in about finding a job, right? Well, be prepared to say, hey, here's some of my skills, but then also, what are your experiences? Have you experienced leading the change, right? There's a uniqueness to trying to advocate and evangelize finding a new way of working of a company that's done something the same way for 20 years as an internal change agent. Same token, as an external consultant being asked to lead that change, whole different set of experiences there, right? Have you spent lots and lots of time with teams, with Scrum and or Kanban, and looking at flow at the program level? Or, Harry was talking about automotive and manufacturers, right? Being able to bring in lean systems engineering, and I mean, how do you optimize flow and reduce the cycle time for hardware manufacturing? Digital twins, digital pairs, right? Do you have experience or just the concepts, right? So this one's really about look somebody in the eye and tell them what you've done before. And you know what? Sometimes you'd be surprised when you say, I haven't done this, but here's why I believe I can, right? And here's how I'll get the help. So don't feel like you need to be inauthentic on these. So improving technical practices. I've never really done it. When I think about it, I had people, and when I ran an organization for front end tech, I had this guy Derek who, dude, he was the one who made our code sing, right? He mentored everybody. It wasn't me. So what are those? What experience do you have, right? Then, another element of this is, do you lead by example? This is probably the one that I guess as a natural mentor, I feel the most passion for, which is really, self-awareness and self-discipline. I'll tell you, I have self-awareness in spades. People who work with me know I'm always craving feedback. Now, here's the thing. They may have to tell me the same thing twice, because I see squirrels on occasion. I get I get passionate. Yes, you see Harry and Bob try not to laugh, right? So self-discipline is something that is not my natural gift, but it's something that I value very greatly, and I work really hard to be disciplined. If I make a commitment, I want to keep it, right? If I agree to help you achieve an outcome, we're going to achieve it. But sometimes, I could be even working on a deck for a webinar 5 minutes before the webinar. Well, today I think it was 20 minutes. But anyway, point being is that authenticity, empathy, transparency. How do you show up with your customers? And knowing that about yourself and being able to comfortably talk about it. Let's take just a moment here, right? Transparency. Here I am in public in front of 70 people talking about how I went from being awesome to being pretty good, AKA I needed to be humbled, right? I'm not good at this. I'm being transparent. I'm being authentic. And, that powers, I'll be blunt, I believe truly to my core that powers the framework. Authenticity, leading by example, right? And in my classes, I tell new people who are taking the SPC class, I give them examples about horrible mistakes I've made that I've been shown grace sometimes and sometimes not. But we're always on this leading journey. And how do you lead as an SPC? Let me just keep going here so we have lots of time for questions. What do you know? Go ahead, Harry.
Another point about that. I love that the word lead is up there in that description, because SPCs, no matter what capacity we talked about in the previous section, where you are on the roadmap, where you are on the framework, you're down at the teams. You're still a leader, right? You still have to show up the same way, whether you're talking down with, shouldn't say down, talking to the teams or talking up to the executives, right? This applies no matter where you are within the organization or who you're talking to in the organization. So I love the fact that it's lead is in the title of the slide, and the fact that SPCs are leaders no matter where they're operating within the organization.
Harry, I was thinking
the emphasis for change, right? They're the model for change.
I was thinking about the conversation we had earlier today. So do you lead by example, or do you lead with safe says?
Right.
Safe says you have to, right?
By the way, we write safe, and we don't say safe says. There's only 10 things safe says. And those are I forget the name of it, but click on the essential article. It talks about the 10 essential elements. There it is, 10 essential elements of safe. If you're not doing safe unless you do these 10 things, everything else is subject to following the principles and adjusting practices in your domain.
And it's interesting. That's one of my mentors, Dr. Steve Maynard. He when I think about Lean Agile leadership, he's the name that comes to mind for me. And he created it with some help from some others. He created an amazing, it's not a public class, it's a learning experience that's available for safe enterprise customers. And the first module of this Leading in the Digital Age series is leading by example. And is transformational for me. I know the people that worked for me at the time were like, Jennifer Fawcett and I went through it together, and we were working with a client, and we pretty much were useless the morning after. And they've since expanded it not to be this intense, half day mind blowing experience to more of a little bit more digestible. But it was visceral and really kind of transformational for me as a leader. I'm bringing this up in that leadership's a huge part of being an SPC, and caring for who you are, knowing your attributes, knowing your proclivities, knowing your biases. Those are all things that will allow you to become more effective. And, as an SPC, you're connecting people with these values and principles and practices. And the more you know yourself, the more you can make those deeper connections, the more effective you'll be at connecting people to these. And then in turn, they'll be effective at connecting these to others. So thanks for bringing, for adding in that there, Harry. I mean, it was definitely, this is probably, it's kind of funny. When you think about the core competency model of SAFE, right? What the foundation is, Lean Agile leadership, and why I have a little circle here.
Go up a slide 2.
What's that?
From there. Yeah, that's
yeah,
at the bottom, the gray bar at the bottom, the foundation of SAFE is leadership.
Yep. So it's the foundation of everything. And now that I'm sitting here looking at my little circle, maybe I need to turn it a little bit so that's absolutely at the bottom and just call it leadership.
There you go.
Like I said, this is a little prototype here, to get. And by the way, if you've got feedback on if you think that if you'd be interested in piloting this SPC self-assessment, please let us know. I've got a couple customers that are willing to try it, but please do let us know. Then let's talk about what you know. This is an interesting piece here in that I've separated it intentionally from experience and expertise. Now you gain expertise. I mean, experience accelerates expertise, but there's the reality is we all start where we start. I literally did my first leading SAFE class the Monday after my implementing SAFE class. Back then it was a 5-day class and you took the essay exam at the end on Friday, but I started my implementing class was started on Wednesday. I mean, my leading SAFE class was Wednesday because you didn't know if you passed until Tuesday. And so I had 9 people lined up to take this class from me, not knowing if I would actually be able to teach it or not, but I was hoping. My point there though, is that I thought I knew so much. And I don't tell this story that often, but I think it was 2014 and Scaled Agile has started to grow. They were hiring hiring people to become SPCTs. I literally sent an email to Dean Leffingwell and I said, "Hey, Dean, I'm an expert on SAFE and I'd love to come work for you." Now, I was working at AT&T at the time, and obviously one of my skills was not taken in the big picture of growing a company, and nothing to do with being at AT&T. And Dean's like, "Yes, absolutely." Right. So I interviewed the next day with Drew Jamillo, Jennifer Fawcett, and Alex, and they listened to me and they grilled me. And when it came to the framework, they're like, you know the framework inside and out, Phil, but you have no consulting experience. Go get some, right? And come back to us later. And I did that. But what's interesting is that you can have expertise and not be able to apply it. One of my passion areas is LPM. And I'll tell you right now, I have a hard time finding people with deep experience successfully implementing lean portfolio management in a way that's not just reskinning the way they work today and calling it something else, but truly, hey, we're doing fiscal year planning. Let's get together and do collaborative cost of delay and WSJF, right? That kind of experience. And all this to say that you can have expertise, but as you understand what your expertise is, ask yourself, where can I get some experience? One of the things that I always want to, I'll throw out here because I don't want to forget to say it, but Gemba. You'd be surprised at how many opportunities for Gemba that are out there. You may have to get creative. You may have to sign NDAs, but I will tell you that there is a difference in being an SPC who's teaching leading SAFE after you've seen both a not so great example and a fantastic example of PI planning. You have something you can bring to that class when you've done it and be able to compare and contrast some of the challenges you saw in the not so ready one and some of the awesome things you saw. And there's I wish Travis was on here because he has a story he tells about when he got his SPC before he had seen PI planning. Then he saw PI planning at a government company, a government agency. There was a guy named Joe, who you're out, if you're listening, Joe, who was my first government leader. Think of a government executive, and he embraced all the values and principles. Amazing example of SAFE in the government. And Joe actually hosted NASA. So NASA's associate director and his staff came and observed the PI planning event so that their SPCs could get some experience experiencing PI planning before they went and launched their own successful arc. So with that said, there are so many ways you can get expertise. I will tell you that I teach LPM, of the classes I love to teach LPM, I love to teach implementing. RT, I like to teach, but we've got other people that love that more than I do these days. All that to say that I'll get safe program consultants inside my LPM class. And I celebrate them. So you can teach lean portfolio management. There's like a 2.5, 3 hour enablement as an SPC. And so you don't have to take the lean portfolio management class in order to teach it. But I love it when an SPC says, you know what, the 3.5, 4 hours of LPM I get through the implementing class doesn't give me the confidence to teach this 2-day class. So I'm choosing to go sign up and pay for an LPM class so that I can experience the class before I teach it. And so ask yourself, how can you gain that expertise beyond what you can read or self-study? Any advice you'd give on that one, Harry, before I move over to the last piece on this?
No, let's move on. I think we want to get to questions. I think you've covered it for sure.
Yep. So domains, just the point here is that lots of different areas you can focus, right? I mean, do you love strategy? Do you love architecture? Do you love hardware, right? So understanding kind of where those domains where you've got experience comes in. And the last thing I'll say on this, and we won't spend any more time, is think about one element, right? Coaching. So what you're seeing here is somebody's self-assessment. The blue, the outside, the highest ratings was the first time this individual took this self-assessment.
Is that individual you, Phil, by the way?
No, it wasn't me,
Oh,
but I'm not
okay.
going to say who it was. Although if I had the assessment when I started my journey, mine would probably look just like this, which is one of the reasons I really liked working with this particular individual. But anyway, it was like, I'm an expert on everything. And then the second time he took it, about 3 weeks later, is the red. Definitely some humbling occurred. The third time was 1.5 years later. And look at the difference between the green and the red. He intentionally made some growth in certain areas. My point is that you can use a self-assessment to really kind of see where you're at. If you're a hiring manager, if you're a leader of a LACE, understand where people see themselves. Last thing I want to throw on here is community. So this here is the secret sauce to your SPC journey. Find communities, participate in them, learn from them. I'm who I am today because Mark, M, Eric, Dima, Audrey, Harry, Mark Ricks, even Dean, and the late great Martin Burns all shared their parts of their journey with me. And I'm actively involved, sometimes more actively than others, on a variety of Slack communities. I'm involved on Dima put together this awesome new part of the community on LACE and transformation. And I go on there and I answer questions. There's a whole variety of places on the community portal. And so if you want to learn to be a more robust, if you want to focus on an area, there's so many communities out there that you can tap into. Anything, Harry, I know you're on the Ask the Experts, which is a forum.
I agree. One thing, ever since I got involved with the Scaled Agile community, my network connections have grown immensely. Just meeting you and me, just like yourself, meeting other people. I had some go-to people that I talked to before, but not, this was a new space for me. I've been working in engineering type organizations, and now it's in agile organizations, and engineering is a little bit closed off and people work in kind of silos, but this community is very open, very giving. So I just encourage you, like I said, start contributing to the forum, start asking questions, start meeting people, come to the summit face-to-face, where we can finally be back face-to-face for the first time ever. It's gonna be awesome. So, there's opportunities to go meet people and start those kind of conversations.
So we'll move into the Q&A section. We had a couple people that submitted questions ahead of time. And, what's interesting is I was looking through the questions that have been asked. A lot of the answer is community, right? So I'll tell you, not every SPC out there has the benefit of working for a company where they can pull in an external person, right? One of the customers we're working with now, they bring in consultants only to teach what they call, these master classes. Hey, I'm big company X, and we've got 60 SPCs, but I want Luke Koehnemann to come in and teach us Agile Product Management because he wrote the class, right? Or hey, I'm having Phil come in to teach LPM because he's got a lot of stories, right? And so that may not be the possibility. Maybe you're on your own like I was, for a long time when I first started, or how many people are. And Slack communities, the community, I mean, if you're genuine and you're sincere and you're authentic, these community portals are where I would probably start, just the community forums. There's a guy named Mike Alber who, boy, he's got a job dealing with hundreds of thousands of people on the forum to try and police it and everything to prevent people from, giving misinformation. But this Ask the Experts, for example, the safe fellows like Harry, you can go in there and you can ask your gnarly question. And I mean, there's one place right there, right? How do you do this? We've got some things like, one of the questions that we had come in was, what is it? Where was it? I'm an independent consultant in SPC over a year with my, leading safe and LPM training validations. I have 20 years of experience, and I tried engaging companies, and I realized I can't do it myself. What venues do you suggest to connect with gold partner organizations, right? And to me, it's the community portals. Imagine, I mean, as the practice lead here, I look at what people write on those forums. I look at LinkedIn, I see what people post. I look for the mindset. I look for individuals who have a certain set of attributes that show that, Luke, one of my mentors, I look for humility. Luke looks for swagger. And so, our consultants, they're humble with swagger, right? And so you can see that through the questions people ask, through the way they interact with the community. And so being part of a Slack community, being part of a meetup, there's a meetup that it's personal. It's not Applied Frameworks, but I work for Applied Frameworks. So there's a little bit of overlap, but there's a meetup I started back in 2014, Scaled Agile DFW. And it was a way for me to bounce my ideas off of a community of people who had way more deep experience in Scrum than I ever had. Because I didn't start with Scrum. I did a little bit, but I really started with Safe and Scale. And so what are those areas of community? If you're looking for a job, the way that you show up in those community forums, the mindful questions you ask are probably as important or more important than the answers you give. Now, the answers you give show insights. Elena, an individual who actually was when I went through my immersion week to become an SPCT or get into the program, this woman, Elena, was in there, and she asked such amazing questions. And so you see who people are through the community involvement they have. So meetups, the Safe Community Portal, and the forums on there, Slack communities, and there's an awesome series of articles that Safe fellow Audrey Boydston wrote. You can look up on Scaled Agile site about informal learning networks. All of those are ways. I'm looking at the questions, and Bob, would you mind facilitating throwing a question or two to Harry and I? Because the ones I'm looking at, I don't want to pause too much and read them, but I think the community ones are a lot ends with the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for the discussions around how to pull on the experience of others and how to use networks and community to further your own understanding of how SAFE works in a variety of contexts. I think you guys did a great job of talking through that, and we've marked some of those questions as answered. Phil, there's a question that came through that reminded me of a discussion that you and I have had within the past working day. And I'll drop it into the chat here, and I'll read it out loud as well, which is that this attendee, recently became an SPC. As part of my continuous learning, I've enrolled in a few training enablements and would like to consider providing training. Now, what else can I do?
So I'll tell you that on the community, so there's a new thing that people may not, I'm trying to see if I can pull it up right now, that not everybody may be aware of. So if you're an SPC, there's a part of the community portal that has this role-based learning, right? And so I was looking at a question in chat we've also got about, I'm an RT, how do I get started, right, as a coach? So this is really the other part of the community, is because getting your certifications, that first step, you have access, and Scaled Agile is actively building out resources just for you to help you on your journey. So there's these role-based learning. This new one Ready to Train, it's pretty amazing. It talks about, there's 10 different personas. Are you pontificating Paula, right? Or Pauline, or are you, hesitant Harry? I mean, whatever, understanding this. And so you can actually go through this learning series. It's free, part of your community portal membership, that gets you ready to train. Another one is RTE Essentials, right? Gain the confidence needed to perform the responsibility of the RTE role. So these are things that are there to help you on your journey. Under Learn, there's also, I think, you've got this awesome media library where you can find people like myself and Harry and others who've given webinars and talks about a variety of topics. So you may not get time one-on-one with Harry, but you can go listen, or Dr. Steve Maynard, but I would encourage you to go check out, the 7 things to stop doing with SAFe from Steve Maynard. That's awesome. It's like you're getting the top tips and tricks. We have the SAFe Summit coming up here in August, right? And Harry and I are both speaking there, and I'm going to share tips and tricks for implementing LPM in a way that accelerates that journey and gets great alignment. Harry, your talk is about, remind me.
I have a panel on big systems, right? How people align and coordinate multiple value streams at large scale. With CVS, yeah. we got one of the largest healthcare companies, CVS, and we've got Boeing, one of the big aerospace manufacturers. So exciting.
Let's look at these questions here. I know that Bob, yeah, what's our next one?
No,
yeah, absolutely. I think you guys have touched on it a little bit, but just to go a little bit deeper on a question from Ramya Palanisamy, how to get practical examples of how agile transformations are done, and potentially even thinking about, if putting my own spin on this, how to thinking about these in the actual context of the organization itself. I'm thinking of, for instance, the case studies that are available on the Scaled Agile website. I see that as one potential resource. Guys, what do you think about that? And are there any others?
Resources for a transformation?
So practical examples of how agile transformations are done. Really specifically SAFe.
Well, we have the implementation roadmap, so usually it's variants on that. In my experience, a lot of times it starts with that first art. There's before we go SAFe, we put a toe in the water and we launch an art to have the experience. That's been mostly my experience anyway, when I was doing this 8 years ago or so. So that's why it's critical to make that first art a successful art, or else it probably has changed in the last 8 years. But there's certainly applying that implementation roadmap that we talked about earlier is key. And then everything else is organizational change, right? So we're going to show them, Phil.
I was going to pull up the customer stories. That's, one of the cool things about how many customer stories are there, right? There's the Scaled Agile curates this content on their customer stories page. And so used to be, these were all written case studies, to Bob's point. It's now real people from real companies sharing their experiences, right? The SAFe Summit coming up, one of the cool things on the agenda is there's entire time set aside so that you've always got customer stories. So you can go learn from Rebecca Davis, who was instrumental at CVS, right? Learn their story, the CVS story, the Porsche story, right? And you can find oftentimes you can find an industry that's similar, and you can watch these. So that's probably and here's the thing, nothing says you can't reach out to one of these individuals and ask them if they'd be willing to have a conversation. That's something that, the answer is no sometimes, and sometimes usually it's no because they don't have time, but, doesn't hurt to ask. And that's how you build your community.
Yeah, and those talk in all different dimensions, right? I know the Porsche story talks about how much more engaged their employees are. So it's not just business results; it's also, employee engagement and better quality and faster time to market. So that all those successes are in these customer stories.
So I'm looking here, scanning chat. So if you indicate you're interested in the self-assessment, in fact, maybe we'll just put you can, opt in, and we'll just send the link out to the as a follow-up here, and you can check it out. It's not going to be elegant, but it'll be on SurveyMonkey, because that's where I built it years ago, and I just got to finish tweaking it. There's a question on here about how hard is it to become an SPCT. It's hard. I'll tell you that Dr. Maynard, who was my guide in the SPCT program, he confided in me that he said it was easier to get his PhD than to get his SPCT. I know you've heard him say that too, Harry.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a journey. You know, and as far as, is there a safe Slack channel? There's not a public Slack channel for safe. You know, Slack's a product, Scaled Agile is a company. I do know that our meetup has an open community. Anybody's willing to join. I use it as a place where the SPCs I mentor, I encourage them to answer questions. So you can certainly reach out to me, and I'd be happy to connect you to that meetup. Anybody can join it. It's the Scaled Agile DFW one. You know, the community forums, you can ask in there if anybody knows of any Slack communities. You know, on your journey, you know, we do provide training and consulting. I don't want to pitch with this, but if you just go to appliedframeworks.com/safe, you'll see our classes. I just want to let you know that, you know, we believe in this stuff ourselves, and that we're you know, we're practicing just like Scaled Agile practices safe, right? What happened last week, Harry?
What's that?
What were you doing last week?
I'm sorry.
At Scaled Agile, what happened last week? Was it last week or the week before?
That what? Give me a hint.
No, well, PI planning.
Oh, we did PI planning. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
No, yeah. So it's funny. Think about it. That's so much how they work that he's not thinking, what was it, right? Because it's normal for them. All this to say that we will absolutely reply back to your questions. Bob.
Yeah, I wanted to thank you guys, Phil and Harry. Thanks so much. I think we could probably have even doubled the time, and it's so great to pull on your experience and your wisdom, talking about the skills, the competencies, how to evolve as an SPC, and ultimately how to become a more effective framework guided change agent. Thanks again to Kristen for putting this together, and the biggest thanks goes to our attendees. Just as in SAFE, our customer is the center of our approach here. And we thank you all for your attendance and the inspiration to have this webinar in the first place. And special thanks to those who provided those great questions. As we've discussed, we will answer all of them and make those answers available as part of our follow-up. In addition, we'll also provide the recording. And finally, as Phil mentioned, if you'd like to go deeper to understand how lean and agile can help your organization better meet its goals, feel free to reach out to us at Applied Frameworks directly. Otherwise, thanks again, guys. Harry, it's great to see you.
Great seeing you, Bob.
Take care, all. And as Dean would say, be safe.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.